Hello, everyone. Can you hear us and see us? Hopefully you can. We'll be starting in just a second. All right, I do see the stream on YouTube now, so I'm assuming that has worked.
Yeah, X is good as well. I see
X
that.
is good. Okay. All right. Well, in that case,
Ooh.
Dan, if you want to get started, feel free.
I love how it says live on X for us. Okay. Welcome everybody to CTRL+Alt+Discuss. This is our new, very informal show that we're starting to do in the when we're not doing the podcast, which is a lot more formal, obviously. And so this is a chance for a lot of times the Windows Central staff to jump on where we're going to be talking about interesting topics related to obviously Microsoft Windows and Xbox. Occasionally we'll play games too. And even on more occasions, we'll have guests like this very first episode where we are graced with Mary Jo Foley, who is the editor-in-chief of Directions on Microsoft. And we go way back on the site to the Windows Phone days. And of course, she goes back even further than that with her legacy of reporting on Microsoft for many years. Mary Jo, welcome to our officially our first version of the CTRL+Alt+Discuss show.
Oh, nice. So, yay. Glad to be on the first one. Fun.
Yes. And we'll probably have you on multiple times because, nice. You know, it's always good to get our insider opinions from our staff, but we also want outsider opinions and people who have different perspectives. And there are a lot of people in this community who have interesting ideas and things we don't always agree on, but we can use the show for that platform. So pretty excited.
Nice.
I'm also joined by Ben Wilson, our senior editor. He's my right-hand man on running the site, along with Richard Devine, who almost made the show today, but he is out of all of us, he has kids.
You say it with such love as well.
Yeah. The only thing we learned about him having kids is they're germ bags, apparently, because he's always sick and they're always sick. But he'll be joining us on occasion as well. And then, of course, Zach Bowden, senior editor, Windows, and also my podcast co-host, who is also running this on the back end. Zach, this was your idea, not for the broad show topic, but for this specific topic, which I guess we could get into. So why don't you explain what we're about to do and maybe even why?
That's right, everybody. It's a tier list. Everyone's favorite format. For a first episode of a show. We've done this before, actually. Me, Dan, and Jez, a couple of years back, maybe even 3 years at this point. We did a whole 2-hour stream where we talked about Surface and we ranked all the different Surface products from 2012 onwards. I don't think we included the Surface table, although I don't know why we didn't. But yeah, we're going to do a similar thing again today with different versions of Windows. Now, to be very clear, we're not ranking every single Windows product. That will be here for days if we were going to do that. So we're just going to rank the highlights, the sort of blockbuster versions of Windows 1.0 through to Windows 11, the client versions, the versions we sort of all know off the top of our heads. We're not going to go into Windows CE or Windows Embedded. We're not going there today. Just the desktop client versions, because just to keep things simple and keep things, you know, on a tighter schedule, because otherwise we would be here all day talking about Windows Phone and the different versions of Windows on Xbox, and it's just too much. So we're going to start with the basics, and maybe in the future we'll diverge. You know, we'll go into things like Windows Phone another time. So yeah, hopefully everybody understands how this works. We have a tier list, S through D, S being the best and D being the worst. And for each different version, we'll just sort of talk a bit about it, give some facts and some of our memories using these products, and then collectively rank where it goes on the tier list. So I think we should do this chronologically, right? We should probably start with Windows 1.0 and work our way through. So
I feel like also, and maybe it's a big ask, could I get a visual representation of this operating system?
Oh, you certainly can if you want to do some talking while I find all the assets.
Yeah, I was going to mention that beforehand because that'd make this a little bit more easy, just because I forgot what Windows 1.0 actually looks like. I remember for myself, I got started on 3.1, so that's where, or technically, I guess it was 3.11. Mary Jo maybe can explain that a little bit differently.
I don't remember Windows 1 either. Even though I'm old enough to remember it, I don't remember ever using it or seeing it. I think, like Dan said, the first one I remember ever really talking about or writing about was 3.1.1, which was around like 93, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
here's what I can do. I can share this. Hang on, give me 1 second. No, what was, yeah, that's fine. Add screen share.
And why was it called 3.1.1? Like there's a 3.1.
It was like a minor update. Yeah, it was a minor update to 3.1. So there was 3.0, then 3.1, then 3.11. But I feel like 3.11 people talked about a lot more than 3.1.
I agree. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just a weird thing that's when that kind of went more mainstream.
Yeah.
So yeah, here we go. Here's version 1.0. This is running in a virtual machine. Believe it or not, I had that ready to go.
If you ever put Windows 95 in high contrast mode, it looks a lot like that.
Yeah. So this is the UI. So Windows 1.0 special in that it didn't actually really support windowing. It certainly could multitask, but there was no such thing as cascading or tiling windows. You had to run things side by side, very similar to Windows 8 actually. But you come down here and run multiple things like so, and you can see here. Wait, hang on. Here it is, Mary Jo. Notepad. This is the debut of Notepad right here.
Oh, is this the web virtual machine? Nice.
Yeah, this is Notepad, and this is where it all began. And funnily enough, a lot of this functionally very similar to the version today, outside of all the AI and stuff it now has. This was.
I was going to say, actually, this is the version I want, not the one.
Yeah. So this is version 1.0. This is what it looks like. It is. Compared to today's design languages, of course, hideous, but rather innovative at the time. I believe the UI was reviewed relatively well. The product itself, not so much. I believe it was met with lukewarm reviews, according to Wikipedia. But yeah, this is the version of Windows that started it all, really. This was, Bill Gates was a driving force behind this. He saw the Mac OS stuff and was like, we need to do something to compete with that. And so Windows was born, running on Microsoft DOS or MS-DOS rather. This is where it started. And, since none of us really have memories of this version of Windows, I'm not really sure how we're going to rank it. We can certainly do our
We could just mention the fact that, coming from a command line interface, DOS, to this, was a huge jump for advancing computers because except for Richard Devine on our staff who loves command line interface, no one else does. You have your Linux users and stuff like that. And I get that there is a power to it and it is cool, right? I mean, come on, anytime in a movie someone's hacking, they're not using Windows. It's always a command line interface. But in order to bring computing to the masses, they had to simplify it. And the GUI was like really big advancement. Apple was doing the same thing around that time. Or I don't know if it was around that time, but they had another version theirs that got really popular. And this is what was important for making PCs mainstream, So I thought that was kind of cool. Even though
you've got to give it props, like for being the original. It's like this is when the mouse was coming about, so it's a big deal. I couldn't tell you anything about Windows 2, but I remember what one looked like just because it was garish. But it's important.
I think to start, we should stick this version as a B tier, only because I feel like this is the groundwork. It could go up or down from here, right? It could either get better or it could get significantly worse. So I think if we start with B, we can move on to Windows 2.0 because Windows 2.0 actually came with some notable improvements over Windows 1.0, including the ability to move and cascade windows. So the sort of version, if you think of Windows, you think of the ability to drag windows around. Windows 2.0 is the version of Windows that first introduced that. It was still based on MS-DOS. But it just sort of added notable improvements to some quality of life enhancements, as well as introducing Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. So that's where those things got started as well. Interface-wise, I don't have a VMware of Windows 2.0, but it did look very similar to Windows 1.0, just with the ability to sort of move windows around and stuff. So that
technically Windows 1.0 was window 1.0.
Yeah,
Windows 2.0 is really Windows 2.0.
Yeah. So I guess none of us have memories of 2.0 either.
No.
Okay. No. So here's what I'm going to say for Windows 2.0. I think it's A because it added Windows.
If we end up with a Windows ME on an S tier, I'm going to be really upset.
Okay.
Listen. I actually liked ME.
No, we'll get
there.
We'll get to that. All right. So Windows 3.1. Windows 3.1 is the one I think that was most of us have memories with.
Yep.
Where do you guys want to start with Windows 3.1? Oh, yeah, or
We
3.0
don't-
rather.
Is it 3.0? And do we have a 3.1 and 3.11, or is it just?
We're gonna group them all into Windows 3.
Okay, fair enough. That's
Okay.
why I needed to know, because
Yeah,
I think there's
okay.
a big difference.
Yeah, sure.
That's where it all started for me.
Yeah, same here. And I think Mary Jo was saying the same thing.
I don't know if Zach was even born yet.
I wasn't, but that's besides the point.
All right, so we'll start with Ben, go to Mary Jo and myself. Start with your 3.1 story, how you got into it and why you liked it so much.
I think it was my parents. Somebody convinced my parents that they needed a home PC just to be a word processor. They needed a PC and a printer for something. I need to ask them why, because I can't for the life of me think why they'd ever need it. And it wouldn't have been cheap back then, but it was Windows 3.1. Because I remember really vividly just file manager, just the file manager icon and the thing of it. And having, I had a couple of games on floppy disks and just spent all my time on Paint because I was just a kid. But I really vividly remember just the jump from 3.1 to 95 was, even as young as I was like, this is crazy to me. But knowing that first PC, this beige smoke stained thing was on 3.1, it's just, oh my God, I love computers now. This is our computer. This is nuts to me. So I was just a child. I was only I was drawing circles and filling them in, but it was still a crazy thing to have in your own house. So it was the beginning for me.
Nice. Mary Jo?
So in my tech career, I started out as a Unix reporter, believe it or not. Like that was where I began covering operating systems. And so Windows 3.1 and 3.11 were the first time where I was thrown into the Microsoft world by my job at PC Week. And they said, you know what, Unix, it's not a far jump from Unix to Windows. So you're going to start covering Windows. Well, it is a pretty big jump. And I just remember the version 3 releases, I think, is where the Windows registry was introduced and things like drag and drop file management. So all these things were really new concepts to me as a reporter. And I don't even remember if I was using the operating system or not. I must have been. But yeah, I just was at that point in my career learning about all these things that made Windows, right? I think that's also when true type fonts came into play. So I was learning all these new concepts that as a Unix reporter, I didn't have to care about, right? But suddenly I was writing about fonts and the registry and stuff like that. So for me, I have a fond memory of it being where my baptism by fire began in the Windows world.
Nice. That's pretty funny. Yeah. For myself, not too dissimilar from Ben's outside of I was a little bit older. So I was a teenager at the time. A lot of this started for me, and I'm sure Mary Jo remembers this, Time Magazine's cover with the internet on it. And it was like something about cyberspace or something like that. Because it was cool. It was called cyberspace.
Yeah.
How's that not cool? And it was just talking about all the potentiality of the internet and all this kind of stuff. And that was just starting. We got an IBM computer. It was mine. I got to keep it in my room. And, I was just locked in that room, basically just figuring this thing out. And the best thing was you could, and this happened especially too with 95, you could hack and tweak the operating system and make it do things it wasn't supposed to. 9 times out of 10, you'd break it, but then you could just reinstall the operating system and start over again. And so this became sort of my place where I learned. But yeah, I mean, 3.11 to me was just cool moving stuff around because you still couldn't do much. But it felt like you could do much, right? I think a lot of us saw the potential, oh, someday this is going to be really interesting. But they were glorified word processors that then could play also video games to a lesser extent. But it was really, of course, the jump to 95 and the internet, which we'll get to, that I think really changed everything.
Yeah. So apparently Windows 3 was the first version of Windows to perform well, both critically and commercially. It achieved 10 million sales in, I don't know what window they're measuring that in, but that was a big number for Microsoft at the time. Although it was criticized by third-party developers for bundling its separate software with the operating environment, which they viewed as an anti-competitive practice. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that in the throughout the 90s. Yeah, that Windows 3.1, it was the first version of Windows to introduce what people at the time described as a three-dimensional interface, similar to Presentation Manager, compared to the Windows 2 interface, which was more flat by comparison, which is very swings and roundabouts. I feel like that's what even today we're going through, different versions of operating systems. Ones look flatter than the others. Some are more three-dimensional. So it's just funny to see that even in the 90s, we were going back and forth between whether we want something more 3D-esque or something more 2D-esque. Yeah, this is where do you guys think this should come on the tier list? Is it bold to call this an S tier version of Windows? I think it may be.
I think it might be too. Because here's the thing. Yeah. We can't compare it to like where we are today in terms of the technology.
Yeah, we have to do it as at the time.
But at the time, and in terms of how it aged, I don't recall, and maybe Mary Jo has, since she actually was reporting on it at the time, I don't recall any like massive negativity around it or people like really disliking it. I think for a lot of people, it was a stepping stone into the world of computers, so they have fond memories of it. But there wasn't any like major bugs or controversies around it that have like tarnished its reputation. Now, Mary Jo, I don't know if you want to chime in if you have any insight on that.
Yeah. I think it was a time when people were getting excited about, oh my God, look what computers can do, right? So I think people were less critical then about Windows than they are now, right? Even if it had major bugs, people would be like, oh, well, who cares? Like, look what you can do with it, though. It's cool. Unlike now, where if some smaller thing happens, we're all like, oh, this is a terrible operating system, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think in that case we're gonna put it S tier for now. We can move it later, but we'll put it up as the best version of Windows up until that point. They've done well to improve overall. Yeah. So up next, Windows 95. So this is, I think, the first version of Windows that a lot of people have memories with. This was the first really successful version of Windows. There's that famous sort of clip of Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and a number of other execs just going crazy on stage, dancing to music at was that the launch event for Windows 95? I think it was.
I think so.
And this was the first version of Windows where people reportedly queued like around blocks to buy. Because remember, you had to go and buy these physically at the time. There was no digital downloads of Windows back in the 90s. So, do we want to start with you, Dan, on Windows 95?
Sure. This was the big game changer. Going back to the Time magazine thing, the internet was just in its infancy. I believe it started with 3.11, had modem support, and I think you had AOL also for 3.11. So, but AOL was in Prodigy at the time, was like this like indirect way to get onto the internet. There were their own networks that just happened to have some sort of, because back then, like the internet wasn't like, you had Gopher, you had FTP, but there was like even a web browser wasn't a thing yet. It was just like direct addresses. And so there was really no interface for the internet. Windows 95 changed that. And that was kind of its goal, was to bring an operating system that was ready for the internet to the masses. And most people didn't have access, but this allowed them to grow as access to internet came out. And I believe it came on 20 floppy disks. My best friend and I, we split the cost of it because we both have 3.11 computers. And we lived in an apartment complex. He was only 10 apartments down from me. And because we would always screw up our Windows builds by trying to hack things, we'd always have to run down to each other's apartment with a stack of floppies and be like, here you go, like to reinstall everything. But yeah, 95 graphically was just a massive shift from 3.1. And it was, it was a whole new world. And, we've written articles about even the soundscape files created for it and how, legendary they were. I'd also say the commercials for 95 were also all over the place. I believe there are quite a few band tie-ins, and wasn't there a Friends tie-in too?
Yep.
I've seen that. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yep. Yeah.
Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry.
Yeah, and so it was like culturally, it was the first time an operating system and anything computing entered into, pop culture. And it was still a slow burn, but this was the absolute catalyst for getting a PC into everyone's home, which was the goal, and to getting people onto the internet, which then eventually spurned everything, right? And this is where I always defend Windows compared to Mac, because Mac didn't do any of that. Mac kind of like trailed along and kind of did some of those things too, but it was Windows that was blazing that path for a very long time. And for that, it was just super critical to the success of computers. Now, I would argue where we are today with computers is sort of more dystopian than I had anticipated, but it was a fun time to be able to do that. I think it was also around that, I forgot if it was 3.11 or 95 where I started playing Doom. And I remember because I would go and hang out at Barnes and Noble, and they would have like books and you can buy the games and stuff like that. And I was always like, what is Doom? Like, what is this game? And I remember you had to have like 8 gigs of, not 8 gigs, it was 8 megabytes of RAM or something like that. And I had to go and upgrade my computer. And it was like a whole thing. And then there's like a sound blaster card. Oh, yeah. By the way, computers didn't ship with speakers. So you had to get a sound blaster card, of which that was a whole thing. And you had to just do all this stuff yourself and kind of figure it out. But it was wild. My best memory of that time was my best friend, I again, 10 apartments down, calling each other for the first time via the computer and connecting up to play each other on Doom. And it was just like, oh my God, this is insane. So that's my story.
Nice. Ben?
Yeah, Windows 95 is a harsh one because it was the time where we already had the 3.1 computer. Like I said, my parents were happy with that. But 95 is when it was when my friends would get a PC. And one of my best friends at school, his parents bought a Windows 95 PC because they bought it with Encarta 95, like the encyclopedia thing, which was learning but fun because it kind of had games in it. But that was just cool to go around to his house. None of us had internet yet. It was just things on CDs. But he, like Dan touched on with Doom, he was the kid that had Duke Nukem 3D. And I was blown away. And I was at his house all the time trying to play this game. And his parents didn't like the game. And it was the family PC. But Duke 3D was like, oh, PCs are legit. This is where... And then I was begging my parents, is there any way we can make this PC run Windows 95? No. It was like the bare minimum cheapest PC for 3.1, so it couldn't do 95. We switched to 98 later, but 95 was the one, like you said, the advertising was crazy. It was on TV, it was on buses. Even in England, it was everywhere. And it was just the box with the flying logo on it. I remember thinking, wow, I want that. But I can't think of a legit explanation for my parents of why I want it besides this game. And like trying to use the excuse of Encarta, I'll learn things, but it didn't work. But it's the one I didn't have. But I just remember being so influenced by it, like, wow, this is a huge thing that I can't get at home. But yeah, I remember it being super iconic.
Nice. Mary Jo.
Yeah, I have so many Windows 95 memories. I lived in Seattle at the time Windows 95 launched. I was at the launch. I was in row 4, actually.
Nice.
Of the launch. Yep. And it was really like all the things you've heard and saw. Like there was a carnival on the middle of campus with a Ferris wheel. Like they went all out for this thing, right? And I remember the night it launched, I was going around town and people were lining up. Like there were hundreds of people in lines at Best Buy and CompUSA. Like they were outside in lines. And the local news went up to people and said, "What are you in line for?" And they're like, "I don't know. But everybody's in line, so I just got in the line," right? It was just so crazy. And for me, it was like the first version of Windows where I kind of felt like as a normal non-power user that I could kind of figure out how to use it.
Right.
Like it made sense to me. Like you guys, you're different. You're like tech people who grew up with tech from a young age and were like hacking and doing all that stuff. I'm just like a normal person who didn't know how to use computers and was teaching myself how to use them and covering the industry at the same time. So it was a very different experience. But when Windows 95 came out and Internet Explorer 1.0 was part of it, I was like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. I like it. It's cool. Like it's for normal people now and I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So it was good. I was like finally feeling like, all right, now I don't feel like an outsider covering stuff. I'm like in the crowd covering it with everybody.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned the ease of use, because Windows 95 was the first version of Windows to bundle MS-DOS alongside the graphical
Yeah.
interface of Windows 95. Up until then, Windows was still something you had to buy separately. So you'd install MS-DOS,
Yeah.
and then you'd have to either use a floppy disk or whatever it may have been to run Windows on top of MS-DOS manually. Windows 95 was the first version to sort of circumvent that, so that it was all in one product. So it was already straight away easier to sort of set up and install as somebody who is maybe not be very familiar with computers. So that was a great step forward there as well. And of course, Windows 95 is the version of Windows that introduced some of the staples of the Windows desktop that we still use today. Things like the taskbar, the start menu, the system tray. Sort of what Windows is today was defined by Windows 95, and we've sort of struggled to escape it ever since. You know, when they tried to Windows 8, people rejected that wholeheartedly. So this really is the version that made the biggest impact, I think. And it can't be anything less than an S tier, right? This has to be probably the most impactful version of Windows ever,
I think.
Yeah, so I think that's fair. We'll put that up as S tier. Again, we have the right to change that, but that's where it's going for now. We also have Windows 98, which launched through. So yes, it's Windows 98, because there was at the time, didn't they do things like packs? I don't know if they were service packs, but they were like content packs or something, right?
You mean Plus?
Yeah, that's right. Windows 95 Plus
pack.
Which, Plus pack, which added a bunch of improvements as well. But then there was also
themes and
is that the one also that added? Yeah, that's the one that had Space Cadet, right?
Perhaps yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
but
maybe
between
pinball game
95
pinball, right?
and Plus pack, there was Windows 98, which was the sort of the mainline follow-up to Windows 95. Looked very similar to Windows 95, but it wasn't as well received. Do we remember why, Mary Jo? Maybe
I don't remember why.
It was
I think in part we were becoming more jaded already, right? Like Windows 95 was like, oh wow, this is amazing, and then it's like, okay, 98, it's okay, it's not as good as that, but it's like a minor improvement. And I feel like that's when people started to be a little more critical of like how operating systems racked up against each other. Before that, it was just like everything was wow, 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 and then it was like, okay, that's good, but what else can you do, right?
Yeah. So 98 was marketed as a tune-up to Windows 95 rather than an entirely new generation of Windows. It was received with mixed reviews, apparently. It did have some web integration, so it leaned more heavily into the whole web thing at the time. I want to say it was the first version with active desktop, if that might have been Windows XP, but it also got its own follow-up not too long after, a second edition, which added some more improvements as well. Some reviews at the time pointed out that this version of Windows did not feel more significantly stable than Windows 95. And I think a lot of people at the time found that for some reason it ran slightly worse on some of their existing hardware. So this is an interesting one in regards to how it was received. The problem with this, because it's so similar to Windows 95, I feel like people's memories of it are probably sort of merged with Windows 95, right? Unless Dan or Ben, you have any
I think I think Mary Jo was sort of on the right path too. It's like, well, Windows 95 was, as people describe, a once in a lifetime sort of upgrade. It was just so massive, and it got so much right out the gate, and people just enjoyed it and they have fond memories. So to follow that up is super difficult, because I think people were expecting that again. And, you know, it sort of started that habit of like, oh, here it is. It's going to be a really massive change, and we're all going to be living in the future. And it wasn't quite that. It's kind of funny. I'm reading some stuff here. Windows 98 doubled down on active desktop and Internet Explorer integration. Some users liked the web-centric design. Others felt it was bloated or unnecessary. See, it started in 98, bloated and unnecessary complaints, you know, but they were, you know, the internet stuff was really growing, and they were trying to build their operating system around that. It kind of reminds me of the AI stuff a bit. And I feel like that's maybe why they pushed AI so hard when it came to Windows 11, was because that they were feeling like, this is it. This is our internet moment again, and we can kind of do this. And it was a swing, and obviously it didn't work out. then yeah, it still relied on the unstable 1632-bit hybrid architecture, and that became a big deal when Windows 2000 came out, which was not the if I recall correctly, that was the IT version, right? That was based on the NT kernel?
Yeah, so 2000 was Windows NT. Windows ME released, I want to say the same year, was still MS-DOS based. So
yeah, and so I remember that was the first time I started experimenting, because everybody was talking about how much cooler 64-bit was. And even though that was not, but that's not a consumer operating system. That was meant for commercial. So, but we can get, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But yeah, I think 98 was just like, it was a middle child, and it was just like,
right.
It fixed some things, it broke some things, so.
This was also around the time when Microsoft was coming under fire a bit more in regards to its anti-competitive behaviors, right? This is really sort of where it began to heat up, because things like, Internet Explorer was quite heavily integrated now. Outlook was Outlook in the product? It could have been at that point. There was Outlook Express, at least. There was a lot going on there. And as you mentioned, there was lots of web integration, which some people were not too pleased about. Windows Explorer got some upgrades. It was, I think it was a well-rounded release, but it was the first version to start. Again, right, you get to a point where like the fundamentals are complete. Now let's start messing around with things, and obviously not everybody's going to appreciate that. So where do we think it comes on the tier list?
C.
Oh, really? You think it's just the first off version of
maybe
Windows?
It's not that horrible. I don't know. I feel like it just isn't that memorable. Like,
I think that's fair. I think B or A is probably fair for now. We'll put it at B, and again, we have the right to move that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which one do you want to talk about first? Windows 2000 or Windows ME? Because I know Windows 2000 technically.
Wait, hold on. Technically, we're missing 98 SE, right?
Yeah, but
I know it's a minor. So okay, we don't need a separate thing for it, but I should say that I think SC corrected a lot of the things that people had wrong with 98 and kind of changed its perception. So, maybe keeping it at B or A, depending on, what are we looking at 98 launch or 98 SC? Because I feel like SC kind of came along and sort of improved things pretty greatly.
Right, with SC, we'll put it at A.
It's way more personal for me, but SC is what I had. 98 SC was, because I started high school, if you like, in 99, and the classrooms there had 98 SE, so that was the next family PC. That's when we got the internet. That's when I got a bunch of PC, like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Age of Empires. That's when it was for me. But I think 98 SE was my Windows 95. The way people talk about 95, it's like, oh, that deserves to be higher. But that's, for me, that was the modern computer. But yeah, if there was some kind of negative backlash, they must have fixed it with SE for it to have stood out like that.
Yeah, apparently it's more stable. It had better driver support, which was a really big deal. 98 was the one that shifted to new driver system, and the second edition really kind of refined it. So, and apparently OEMs really liked it too. So yeah, I think second edition was a winner for them.
Right, up next is what I think is fair to say the first controversial version of Windows, and that's Windows ME, stands for Millennium Edition. So this was released in the year 2000 as a direct successor to Windows 98, sort of released alongside or a bit just before Windows 2000. We do have Windows 2000 here, which we will talk about, only because I feel like although 2000 was aimed like more squarely at businesses, I remember seeing it everywhere.
I used it.
Home PCs. So we will talk about Windows 2000, but we'll start with Millennium Edition. So continuation of the Windows 9X line, still based on Microsoft DOS. It was the last version of Windows to be based on MS-DOS before the next client version of Windows, being Windows XP, being based entirely on the NT kernel. Dan, do you want to start here with Windows ME? Do you have any memories of this?
I don't. And again, if you can maybe find me a screenshot of even what it looked like.
Looks like Windows 95.
I don't. So I don't remember much distinctive about it. I do remember the controversy though around it. Some people thought it was more unstable and had more bugs. I think that was now, like a lot of things, it's my personal experience. I never had issues with ME. Like, it ran fine for me. I liked a lot of the features. I can't tell you what specifically about it I liked, but I remember at the time being like, why is everybody complaining about this? This is cool. So that's just kind of my view on it. I don't really remember much about it, but I don't remember many complaints either. So,
Ben?
So this ME was the first one, like Dan, very, very like shallow knowledge of it, but it was the first one that my sort of circle avoided purely on word of mouth, because one person had it and ran into so many issues with what they had that they just told everybody they knew, don't bother with this version of Windows. And we didn't get any tech information from anywhere else. And we didn't read any magazines or go online to read about it. It was just, don't use this version of Windows. And we were like, fine. And we stayed on 98 SE. And that's all I know about ME is this guy was really mad that his his software and games didn't work. So he just shooed us away from it. And the only other thing I know is it's the more sort of regular person version of 2000. And I just skipped over it. I was just like, fine, swept it away and stayed with 98.
I think a lot of
it
people.
really was this word of mouth thing about like people were like, yeah, no, don't install, it's bad. And it was just like, it was strange. It was just like urban legends almost that went around that really damaged its reputation. I'm curious if Mary Jo has more insight on it, since she was definitely covering it at that time.
I was. And I felt like Windows ME was something Microsoft was embarrassed that they shipped, right? And the reason I say that is when it was time to launch Windows ME, they decided to launch it in like retail outlets. And so I called them and I'm like, where in New York are you launching this? And they said, you have to go to Long Island to a mall way out in Garden City. That's the closest one for the Me launch. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Okay. So I went out to Garden City and there were like a couple people standing around demoing it at a computer store. And I'm like, that's it? That's the launch of ME, right? And so it just always felt like Microsoft was kind of embarrassed they did it. It didn't have any big redeeming qualities. And it felt like it only lasted in the market a really short time before they came out with XP, right? And I just, my memory of it is just like you guys are saying, like people were like, yeah, it's not the best release and don't really pay a lot of attention to it. And the fact that that's how they launched it said a lot to me. But the one thing I do like, and this will segue into Windows 2000, is I always thought Microsoft should have different releases of Windows for consumers and enterprise, because the needs and desires are so completely different. And this was a case where they tried that, and then I guess they decided no. But I was kind of happy they did that. I'm like, oh, good. There's the enterprise release. There's a consumer release. Like, then you can focus on the things that both of those markets want. But then they never pursued that.
I agree. They should have pursued it. And the reason where they screwed up was, as a tech, I was just out of college when Windows 2000 came out. And obviously at this point, I even experimented in college, not in the wrong ways. I dabbled in computer science. I could not do computer science. I loved computers. I loved hacking. I was doing all this stuff. Then I was like in a class learning binary, and I was just like, yeah, I'm out. I got to drop this. And I dropped that class. I couldn't do it. But I had a friend who was just like into it. And I was just like, you have to have a special mind to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Agree.
That's not me. But here's where they screwed up with 2000, because 2000 was coming out. And as Mary Jo pointed out, this was, aimed at enterprise, but it was the first 64-bit operating system. And we all had 64-bit chips by this point. And it was like, I want that. And then they came out with not a 64-bit consumer version.
Right.
And so I remember all of us into computers on the internet at the time we were all playing around with Windows 2000. And 2000 is very boring looking. It's a very stripped down basic thing, but people that attracted some people for that reason. But it was because it was using 64-bit. It was supposed to be faster. It was supposed to be more secure. And it was that, people have to understand technology moved very slowly back then. Like a jump from 32 to 64-bit was just like, oh my God, this is going to be massive, right? And we didn't really know what to expect. And so you had a lot of consumers and, enthusiasts, I should say, playing around with Windows 2000. And I think that's where they screwed up, where I think they should release a consumer version operating system and one for enterprise, but one shouldn't have some weird new killer technology in it that the other one doesn't get, right? Or at the very least, reverse that. So the consumers get the cool thing first and enterprise gets the boring thing. If they could do that, that's fine. But that's why a lot of us used 2000. And I can't tell you 2000 was necessarily any better. It was just more fun to experiment with. But there was a lot more, as a consumer, a lot more. There's no drivers for 64-bit, so nothing worked.
Yeah.
Before we get too far away from Windows ME, which, by the way, I've just learned was actually supposed to be pronounced as Windows Me. I hate that. I cannot believe anyone did that.
For you and for me, Zach.
Yeah. So Windows Me. So interestingly, at the time it reviewed rather well in regards to publications, but once it got into the hands of users, that's when some of the issues started to arise. The PC health systems and people had problems with. System Restore, which Windows Me first introduced, had a big bug in it, which caused a lot of issues as well. Although Microsoft did release an update to fix it. It's possible that Windows Me over time has had its reputation sort of just get worse. Apparently to the point where it's been heavily panned by users, mainly due to instability issues. Retrospectively, Windows Me is viewed as one of the worst operating systems of all time, being unfavorably compared to its immediate predecessor and successor. PC World dubbed Windows Me the Mistake Edition and placed it fourth in their worst tech products of all time feature in 2006.
Wow.
So yeah, this was not a well-liked version of Windows. And I think because there was so much going on with Windows at the time, with Windows 2000, and also second edition only came out in 1999, so not really a year later, Windows Me launched, and then Windows XP in 2001. It really just sort of got, it might have felt unnecessary to a lot of people and just caused more headaches.
Yeah.
Apparently, in the Netherlands, Windows Me was infamously known as Windows Meer Ellende, which is Dutch for more misery. So yeah, not a very well liked version of Windows. Where do we think it comes on the tier list? I think it's got to be D, right? It's the first D version of Windows. There's no saving grace for Windows.
But leave room for some other ones that are coming up.
Yeah, I was going to say it'll have some company, but it's there.
All right. So Windows 2000, we did already just start talking a bit about it. This, I think, is a more favorable version of Windows in the eyes of many. It was the first. Well, not the first version. It was the first, I want to say, mainstream or widespread version of Windows to be based on Windows NT, because obviously Windows NT had been about for quite a while now. There was Windows NT 3.11 for workgroups. Windows NT existed all through the 90s, but this was the first major release, I feel like, that sort of gained widespread attention, even though, as we've already discussed, it wasn't really a consumer-facing version of Windows. It was more enterprise. But you could find this version of Windows on any kind of device, really, and it was the preferred version over Windows 2000, over Windows Me in the year 2000. So, Dan, let's start with you. I know you just talked a little bit about Windows 2000. You've got any other things to add?
Not really. Like I said, it was a very different experience. It was stripped down. You didn't use it because it looked better or necessarily even did things better. It was just that it was because it was the 64-bit thing. That's all it was. It was just that it was like, it was also this, you're not supposed to have it, right? Because it was easy to get a consumer version of Windows back then, but to find and get the enterprise version of Windows was like, yo, come over to my house. My parents aren't home. Let's go. Like, you weren't supposed to be running it. And that's what its allure was, because it was like new, it was forbidden. It wasn't for consumers. It was for business. You're not supposed to have it. And that was kind of like allure for a lot of people. But in of itself, it wasn't a great operating system. I don't remember like necessarily enjoying it. I think I had more problems with it. I think this was also around the first time I installed Linux, and like it was the same experience. So it was just about the new technology.
Mary Jo?
Yeah, I'm looking up Windows 2000 now because I'm like, are there other things that I need to be reminded of about this? I was trying to think if it ran on other chips other than Intel, like Windows NT did. Like, did it run on Alpha and PowerPC and all that stuff?
So apparently, there were earlier builds of it that did, but the final version didn't, I believe, is what I'm reading here. So that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, because some people were excited when they thought it was going to run on things other than just Intel, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, didn't they also have multiple versions of it that were like advanced and data center? I think maybe they had like all these weird SKUs of it. So it was definitely for power users, right? We're like high-end power users, work like enterprise. It wasn't for normal people at all. It was meant specifically for that audience.
Yeah, there was professional, there was server, there was advanced server, and there was data center server.
I know, of a client operating system, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think the other big thing about it too is because it was 64-bit, it supported more RAM, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like another big draw. People were just like, I don't even remember what the RAM count was back then, but people wanted to be able to install more RAM.
Yeah.
And and I remember the older versions of Windows had like a very low ceiling. I think they couldn't go higher than that.
Yeah. So Windows 2000, there's a couple of notable things that introduced that are sort of staples in Windows today. So plug and play. So the idea of plugging in a USB drive or a peripheral and having it be recognized by Windows rather quickly was a thing that was introduced with Windows 2000, which is something that I think we will take advantage of today. NTFS 3.0 was introduced here as well. It also shipped with version 7 of DirectX. So this was a gamer's operating system. Wow. It wasn't really, but it was... games did take advantage of that, and they did run better with DirectX 7 at the time. So that's pretty cool as well. And yeah, lots of just general quality of life improvements and under the hood platform enhancements. Again, because this is Windows NT, which is no longer MS-DOS. And so where do we think this comes on the tier list here? I think Windows 2000 is viewed quite favorably.
Yeah.
I would probably put it at A. I don't think it's an S tier version of Windows because, again, it wasn't even a consumer version of Windows, but it was a good, strong operating system, I think is fair to say, right?
Yeah.
All right, we'll put it at
A for going forward.
Yeah. Right. So up next is the first version of Windows I think we may all have lots of opinions on, and that is Windows XP. Windows XP released in 2001. This is the version of Windows I think even more people have memories of, especially younger people today. This might be their first version of Windows. It was, I believe, people called it the Fisher-Price Windows at the time because the interface was very colorful. It was very unlike any version of Windows before it. And yeah, Ben, let's start with you. What any thoughts on Windows XP?
S tier. Yeah, S tier. No, it was the one for me that lived the longest. I ran my XP Service Pack 3 machine into the ground. It ran everything, every piece of software, every game I had, this still worked. It was compatibility modes. It was just, yeah, look at it. I still have my wallpaper as Bliss. It's just the most iconic thing I've ever used in my life. I for a long time I would still use the classic theme to make it look like 98, but then I just eventually warmed up to this. Like Dan when you said about that you're not supposed to have it. I can't remember who told me about it, but there was like a secret theme. It was Royale something or other. It was black theme, and that was when my friends was like, if you do this in the registry and you hack it, and it was just seemed like so crazy just to make the theme black. Like, but it was. I mean, I was a teenager as well. It was really sort of whatever you were interacting with, like all the music I was listening to at that age, I still listen to now. So I still think that XP is the best thing that was ever made. But it was just, everything was compatible. They had full internet at this point. So it was just, I don't remember ever being angry at XP for anything. It was just the best version of Windows to me. Arguably that's not true, but it's just because of how old I was at the time, I think.
And it also introduced Clippy.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, Clippy was Office 2003, but yeah, that would have been on Windows XP at the time.
Got it. Okay.
Windows XP introduced Rover the dog.
So Rover and there was Merlin.
Man.
Yeah, let's see if I can find him. Hang on, because I think he only appeared when you were trying to search for something. But here he is. So yeah, there he is.
There you
go.
Yeah.
What do you want to search for?
Yeah.
Pictures. There you go.
Yeah. Dude, that's literally that was Copilot back then, man.
Yeah,
it was.
That's what it should be.
Yeah. It's the Japanese version. Did you guys see the Japanese release of Copilot? You can install it. It's pretty wild. It introduces little characters. Like there's a dolphin, there's a mushroom, and there's like two other things. And they literally just will live on your desktop, and you click them and it brings up the Copilot window. It's hilarious.
A dolphin called Kyle.
Yes, it's a dolphin called Kyle. Well, I'll let Mary Jo go first. I mean, she has, I'm sure, some opinions about that operating system when it first came out and covering it. Oh, is she disappeared for a sec. There she is. Mary Jo, you got some thoughts and opinions on XP?
I do. I think what I remember most about it is that it was very stable, right? Like, I mean, there were problems, but it stuck around a really long time. People just treated it as like, this is what Windows is, right? And then I just was looking it up and I'm like, oh yeah, this is when they introduced product activation. That was the beginning of
that's
that
right.
hated part of Windows, right? I remember I wrote so many things about activation because people were so freaked out about it when it was first introduced and it kept screwing up. That was the one thing that did keep screwing up was how product activation worked and what it meant and what was Microsoft tracking and all that stuff. So other than that, though, the operating system itself, I feel like people didn't have a ton of complaints about it. It just seemed like it did what Windows was supposed to do, right? And I remember it as a pretty favorable release.
Yeah. I remember it as being a really customizable version of Windows. It was, as Ben said, yeah, there were like this idea of secret themes and stuff you could download. And it wasn't just like themes from Microsoft. You could get like some pretty cool third-party themes made by like...
Yeah, I think that's when the
diehard
third-party
Windows fans.
stuff really started to kick in, where you go to forums and introduce a new simple program. And like even like going to the start menu, if you do that for a sec. Yeah. So see where it says Zach and it has that default image. Like, I don't think you could upload your own photo at the time, but I think there were like hacks and third-party programs that would allow you to insert your own photo, which became like normal for that kind of profile thing. Right. And there's a bunch of changes like that and stuff like, of course, the audio stuff, people always would change the themes for the audios. Theming was a big thing as well. Actually, it was funny. I was looking up some info about it. I'm just going to say clear type subpixel rendering.
What does that
which
mean?
is basically smoother font displays on LCD screens.
Yeah.
So do you guys remember running that?
I know, yeah.
That little app that they had, and you'd be like, it'd give you the fonts and you move it on the list. It would be like, is this clearer? It was like an eye test, which looks better. It allows you to pick how your fonts look and how clear and smooth they look. And it was like all part of that. There were just some like cool things about it, but yeah, I don't know. There's it was very colorful. It did have a lot of those icons.
Yep.
I am curious why, someone should do a meta-analysis, maybe this is me, about operating systems and our retrospective kind of views of them. Like, did we look, well, I was going to say XP, maybe when it came out, because things were kind of pretty good. That is until September 11th. But, I wonder if OSs and how we feel about them almost reflect the current economic and social times where people, have good memories of everything. And, that impacts the way we kind of view these things.
I think XP was the first time that we sort of had real user accounts. Like my mom had an account and I had an account. We did have our own themes and everything. And it felt like the first real PC that more of my family wanted to use. It was probably because we had more of the modern internet, right? But they had their own profiles and everything like that. And it did feel customizable. And I would do things like change the startup sounds and the shutdown sounds to just stupid stuff. Some WAV file I'd find somewhere, I ripped it out of a game. But yeah, it's not that we didn't use the PC before that as a family PC, but we just used it as is. But having user accounts and your little icons and then Windows, MSN Messenger turning into its own thing and going further, it did feel like really, really approachable. Everybody wanted to use the PC kind of thing. So the Fisher Price thing's funny because it's just a really, really friendly interface. All the icons are gorgeous.
Yeah. It is an odd choice though to go for this color scheme. I think it does certainly match the wallpaper. I'm guessing like they just found that wallpaper and like, we need to theme Windows around this wallpaper. I even remember like you used to be able to download tools to like change the text of the start button and stuff. Like that was like you could do so much to this version of Windows in regards to customization. I remember when Vista came out as well. Nobody wanted to move to Vista, but you could download Vista themes for Windows XP. So a lot of people just did that. Like, this was like a really friendly, customizable, just a really personal version of Windows, I feel like.
I was going to say in hindsight, we should have done this, but we could actually probably just do it as a separate show. We can probably go through the same eras, but talk about important key apps during that time, which I think also influeed because it's like I remember XP and I remember doing things, but like, what was I doing specifically at that time with XP? I was probably starting to rip movies from DVDs. MSN Messenger at some point came along and was really big, as well as AOL AIM. Messenger was a big thing. Of course, you had your web browsers.
You want to talk about customizable? It's Winamp. You'd never seen a music player look so weird in your life.
Right.
Yeah, Winamp was just, that was its own thing. There's also After Dark, the screensavers. Like screensavers were, I mean, it's so funny in hindsight now, but there was a time where you would walk into your room and you just saw your screensaver and like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And there was
3D pipes.
Yeah, and there would be like all sorts of crazy things that the screensaver would do. Like, and you could choose different styles, like the After Dark stuff, or you just go with the flying toasters. But they were just funny to watch, and it was like my computer is doing nothing. This is great, It
was a simpler time, Dan. It was a simpler time.
It really was. Yeah, it really was. I think it was also around this time. I want to say there's the SETI Explorer thing. There was, I think, RSS news feeds and apps. I remember at some point around, I think it was when I was using XP, I had an app that was like a news ticker.
Yeah.
And it would just show headlines coming in. I was like, this is wild. Like, I can get news just like as it's happening, which of course just became just part of our culture for everything, right? But back then it was so new.
Yeah, so Windows XP was the first version of Windows to ship with the dual pane start menu. Up until now, the start menu was a single pane, and this was the first one to launch like the ability to pin.
Which is so funny. Imagine that meeting. What are we going to do with start menu? Here's an idea.
Double start menu.
Oh my God. Two panels.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah, it was also I believe it was the first or one of the first to ship with Windows Movie Maker and Windows Messenger as well, MSN.
Movie Maker.
Yeah, and it also comes with all of the infamous games: Pinball, Minesweeper, Internet Spades, Hearts, Free Cell, Spider Solitaire. It's all here. And
you could do a whole documentary on those games, because those games really did. I mean, that started the whole thing of like you work in an office and like, oh, cool, they have Solitaire here installed, Which, by the way, I still don't know how to play Solitaire or Minesweeper, but I always went for. I don't. But that's because I always went for pinball, man. Space Cadet 3D pinball was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I loved playing that all the time. Like, that was my
Minesweeper on my phone.
Yeah, I look at him like, I don't get this. This does nothing for me. So
XP also shipped with an email client that isn't a web app, so that's automatically an S tier for me. I think we're ready to rank it. I mean, is there any debate? It's got to be S tier, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Unless there's something above S.
Yeah. All right. We'll definitely put it up at S. For now. Oh, where did I put it? There we go. Up here with S. All right. Up next is Windows. Windows Vista, released in 2006. Wow. This was the follow-up to Windows XP. Took a while for them to get this version out. They had a few issues during development, as we all probably remember. But this is an interesting one, because I think this is the first like divisive version of Windows. In that, don't get me wrong, a lot of people do hate it, and I understand that. But there's some people who like it. I'm one of the people who really liked Vista at the time, and even to this day, I think Vista is still one of, if not the prettiest version of Windows that Microsoft ever put together, because it rides that. At the time, there was this idea of like classic Windows and modern Windows didn't really exist yet. So the Windows Aero stuff was very much a top layer thing, but because it didn't really. It merged really well with the classic stuff, I feel like. So there wasn't really an inconsistency to Windows yet that we have today with later versions. So with Windows Vista, obviously, the biggest change was the interface. The interface was updated dramatically with Windows Aero. They added glass translucency effects to a number of these system areas, such as the start menu and taskbar and app window controls. It also added a whole number of new features and visual styles. Windows Ultimate had Dream Scene, which was live wallpapers, a feature that we have not seen return to Windows since Windows Vista. Introduced a new welcome center, introduced user account control, BitLocker, so many things that we sort of use in Windows today. Mary Jo, let's start with you, because I'm sure you have lots of opinions on Windows Vista.
I can't believe you waited that long to say UAC, because that was the thing that made people hate Windows Vista.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Right? Like, the idea was good, but the implementation was bad. And I don't know if you guys remember all those pop-ups constantly, but people were just like, okay, what is happening with this UAC thing? It's too much, right? I feel like that more than anything is what made people hate Vista. And whenever you hear complaints about it, it was always about UAC. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about anything except that in my world. Like, that is, they were just like, I don't know what they got to do, but they got to fix the UAC thing. And I feel like the other thing it did that was a little divisive, and we know about this from Windows 11, is they raised the hardware requirements for the operating system. And that also was somewhat controversial, because people were like, why do we need that? Why are we doing that now? Like, why can't I use my old PC? Why do I have to get a new PC? And so I think those two things combined are really just quash anything good about Vista. Like, I don't know anyone in my enterprisey world who has a good memory of Windows Vista.
Yeah. So to give context to the UAC stuff, UAC stood for User Account Control. It was basically a security feature, right? It was designed to make it so that apps couldn't just do what they want on Windows. It wanted user input first. The problem is that it was really needy. It basically asked the user for permission to do anything.
Everything. Right.
And it just became annoying in the end. People just got frustrated with Windows being just constantly asking them for permission, even to like open an app or to move a file. In some cases, it was just like, yeah, you can. I want you to do that. Can you do that?
It's even worse than the cookies thing that we are saddled with today, right? It was even more intrusive and constant. Like, you'd think, okay, I already solved that, and it's not going to ask me again for my approval, and it would ask you again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, here's the desktop stuff. So here's the interface. Like I said, I think this is a really pretty version of Windows. I still think it just looks great even today. Maybe that's because obviously Apple's doing its whole liquid glass thing now, and they've sort of brought back this whole sort of translucency aesthetic. But Microsoft did it first with Vista, and I won't let anyone forget that. So yeah, they did it first, and I feel like they did it better. This was the first version of Windows to add a search box to the start menu, which is a crazy concept. I feel like today, like, of course there's a search box there, but up until this version of Windows, to do search in Windows, you had to go into the Windows Explorer, and it was terrible. Don't get me wrong, Windows search to this day still isn't much better, but it's with this version, Windows Vista, it became a lot more convenient to actually look for the apps and files on your computer. So this is where Windows search finally started sort of being taken a bit more seriously with Microsoft. And then, of course, we've also got the Windows sidebar, which actually lasted until, I want to say, Windows 7, right? Windows 7 also had the sidebar, so where you had your clock gadgets and stuff. And this became a security nightmare, I believe, in over time. It just full of security holes that were never fixed. And so, yeah, this was something people, I think, turned off quite frequently. Dan, have you got any thoughts on Windows Vista?
I just remember the controversies. I remember the codename Longhorn. I remember it was going to get this new file explorer, or it was a file system, right? That was going to be this experimental file system, which eventually jettisoned.
WinFS.
And then there was, WinFS. Then there was the, of course, Arrow for the interface. And there was like, it was the first build of Windows that felt like it had been dissected before it even came out. And we were hearing about its development, more specifically, its delays in development in real time almost. And that was strange, because it kind of built up like Arrow was so crazy, because I think it looks amazing, especially for that time. But the problem with Arrow was it was the first time that the operating system really started to become the limitation of being able to run features due to your hardware, right? You needed a specific hardware to be able to turn on all those Arrow features, and most PCs at the time struggled with it. And so you'd want that look, you'd want the translucency, but it would impact your performance. And that sets a bad experience for people, because they will force themselves to try to use it because it looks great, but then it's slow and may have bugs or issues, and then it shapes and clouds their memories of it. But I liked the widgets. I liked the photorealism that they were kind of doing at the time. I thought we just talked about XP's, Fisher Price look, which I didn't mind. It was fine. A lot of stuff doesn't bother me a lot, but this was very much a big departure from that. The UAC was definitely kind of annoying. It did feel like that was more of a nanny operating system, I guess, where it was always flagging you on stuff, but it had a lot of potential. I don't have any super bad memories of it, of it crashing all the time. I just remember that there was, in order to run the highest version of Arrow, you're going to have like this kind of specifications on your PC, and we're like, who has that? And no one likes to be told that, as we experience with Windows 11, you need new hardware to run this operating system. Like, no matter how good or valid that request may be, it never sits well with people. People never go, yeah, but they had to do it because of security reasons, right? People don't care until it's not secure. But yeah, I don't know. It was a big swing, but I think it was too mired with too much ambition, like the FS, the file system thing or whatever that was. Like, that was like, people were talking about that, like how that was going to game change. I think it was around this time too, and maybe Mary Jo knows, like, there's always been talk of kernels, that they're going to swap out the kernel at some point, and that there's research being done on that. And I think people were really looking for some big evolution and some significant change, almost like that 64-bit jump. And that didn't happen. We just got a really pretty operating system that struggled on people's hardware.
Ben, any thoughts?
I'm trying to think of something nice to say about Vista. It was the first version of Windows that priced me out, because at this point I'm a fully grown adult, and not only could I not afford Vista, but I definitely couldn't afford the upgrades I'd need to a PC to run the thing. So it just kind of passed me by, which, Aero looked gorgeous. I liked, it's so small, but again, because of my age, there was like a games folder that was like a very sort of game launcher type thing that had real big, beautiful icons for the games, all glassy stuff, and they were all in one place, and it was cool. It was like when Crysis came out, but like, if you had a PC that could run Crysis, you probably had Vista. I did not, so I was fully priced out of Vista. Never had it. Couldn't afford it.
Yeah. So as Dan mentioned there, that the idea of like you needed a certain set of system requirements to have the full-blown sort of Windows Aero interface. That also spawned the computer hardware index, I believe it was called, where your Windows would rank your PC out of, I want to say, a score of 7, I think it was, or something like that. And no one ever really got the highest score at the time, because I don't think it was even possible. But
technology has not been invented yet.
Your base score was always based on your least performing spec. So even if you had an amazing CPU and amazing GPU or something, if you had a low amount of memory, you'd get a lower score. Like, it just didn't matter how good one or the other aspect was. It wasn't an average. It was whatever's the worst thing in your PC, that's the score you get. And that was, I think a lot of people didn't think that was very fair. Real quick, coming back to the UAC stuff, this is why it was a problem. I'm just trying to enable automatic updates here, and I'm pressing OK, and I'm getting the prompt for UAC. That's a silly, like, people just got very frustrated with that. It didn't make any sense to be asked for basically every single thing to have permission to do it. So Windows Vista was the first version of Windows, I want to say, that really sort of laid the foundations for what Windows is today in regards to Windows as a platform. A lot of the advancements they made to Windows NT with Windows NT 6.0, which launched with this version, sort of really are what powers Windows today. Vista was the legwork to make Windows that we have today possible. With that in mind, where do we think it's coming on the tier list here? Because, I would give it an A, but I don't know if many people would agree with that.
Ooh, good luck.
Yeah.
No.
I gotta say at least a B, C.
C.
Maybe a C.
C. I think C is fair, because even though it was mostly fixed by Vista Service Pack 2, but at that point it was too far gone, and Windows 7 was around the corner. So we'll put it at C. It was ambitious, but rubbish.
That's what I was going to say. It had a ton of ambition and potential, and that clouds our memory a little bit, but the actual experience wasn't good.
Right. The thinking behind it was good. Like, better security, that was a good idea, but the implementation, not good. Yeah. I got to go back to that.
All right, here we go. Windows 7, S tier. Do we think Windows 7 is a good operating system? Released in 2009, 3 years after Windows Vista. It was the immediate follow-up, and it was basically put together to right the ship when it comes to what went wrong with Windows Vista. They added an updated taskbar, improved start menu, a number of other quality of life features and enhancements, and shipped it out as Windows 7. Dan, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on Windows 7?
Oddly, I don't have a ton of specific memories on Windows 7, but I'm looking at images of it. I think I really liked it at the time. I think it looked great. It was definitely much more stable. And I feel like it just wasn't as annoying for whatever. Something with Vista's color scheme also just, it didn't work for me. It was, and I granted you could change that and everything, but it was just like out of the box. Something just felt darker and not as happy. Maybe again, that's coming from XP with the Fisher Price colors, but this was more neutral. Because like, yeah, you look at the taskbar there, it doesn't have any color, right? And it's translucent. It looks really neat. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any, but I guess because Windows 7 feels a lot like kind of Windows 11 in a lot of ways.
Mary Jo?
So I only have good memories of Windows 7. Even though Steven Sinofsky ran the team at the time, it was still a good operating system.
We'll
talk about Windows 8 in a minute, but Windows 7, like, you know what? He came over to run the Windows team at that time, and the mission was fix Vista and get the trains to run on time, make everything work right, get this out in the set time window that we have, and just make it solid. And I think on all those goals, they succeeded. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
100%.
Actually, that's a really good point. If one, because we just passed over the moment where Microsoft missed mobile, because Windows X, because Vista was so bad that they put all their resources into fixing it. And we got Windows 7, which thumbs up, it worked. But because of that, they let Windows Mobile just, who cares? And like, this is where they started falling behind. And because for them at that time, desktop, that meant there was no Azure, there was no cloud, and like, and none of that was, this was their money maker. And so I understand. So I understand that, putting the whole company behind this and making it right. And they did it. But at the same time, they sidelined mobile and phones. And that became sort of almost the bigger thing. And this is where it started, all that.
Was this the first release where they did extended security updates too? That just tells you. So that tells you how much people were like betting on this. Like they were like, this is solid. I want to stay with it. I'm willing to pay for extended security updates for it rather than get off of it. It's good enough that I want to stay. Right.
Yeah. I remember gamers loved this version of Windows and they hung on to it for as long as they could because it is just so clean. It's, it's the last version of Windows to really be bloat free in the sense that there's no, insistence on a Microsoft account. There's no ads. There's no pushing for you to download certain things. It's just the bare bones operating system. And it is super light and it runs super well. It's the first version of Windows to update the Paint tab after, I want to say over a decade. Windows Vista had the old version. This is the first one with the sort of Office-esque sort of tabbed interface that they were pushing at the time with Office 2010, I think it was. So that's really nice to see. There was some cohesion there. This doesn't ship with an email client, apparently, which is actually a surprise to me. I could have sworn it did, but at least this ISO image doesn't have it. But yeah, of course, the biggest upgrade was the taskbar, right? This was the super bar, as they called it during development. This was the version of the taskbar that prioritized app icons over, having a longer bar with the title in the name. You can also move apps and pin apps to the taskbar as well. This is the taskbar that essentially killed the start menu because everybody just started pinning everything to the taskbar. So there was no need to add things to the start menu anymore, although the start menu is still here. Functionally very similar. They did add the ability to see like tasks and stuff for things that appear here, but that's the only real notable functional difference between the Vista and 7 start menu. They added I think that might have been on Vistas already, but they have a calendar view here as well. But yeah, overall, it is just a more polished version.
In the Action Center, right?
Action Center, no, there's no notification center in Windows 7. That didn't come till Windows 10.
Okay.
Wow.
You can-
Really?
Oh, I just saw it pop up. You had to set like action.
Yeah, they
center or
have
something.
this, but this isn't like a
Okay.
notification center. It's just like a make sure you have
Oh,
your
okay.
updates installed
Yeah.
area. So it's not really notifications. But yeah, so they also toned down UAC. UAC is still a thing in this version, but it's certainly not as annoying now. It won't prompt you for every little thing. And you also have the option, as far as I'm aware, let's see if I can find it. You can now change the level of UAC as well. So you can like make it less
Oh,
if
yeah,
you don't
that's
ever
right.
want
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Or you can make it a little bit more naggy like it was in Windows Vista. So that's a cool addition that they added as well. So they really did just address Windows Vista's biggest sort of issues fundamentally and polish it up and ship it as Windows 7. And yeah, I think to this day, this is one of the this version of Windows, I think, is held quite dearly in people's hearts. Ben, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a shame, because I need to jump in a minute because we got reservations in 15 minutes because I'd really like to jump. I'd really love to listen to Mary Jo talk about Windows 8. But so 7 is, I think, if XP is my favorite, I think 7 is the best. I've been trying to think. The only negative thing I could ever say about 7, and it's such a personal thing, is I didn't like the hidden taskbar labels, but that's just because at this point I was getting to the point where I didn't like change. And any changes, I hate that. But as long I could just go into it and put labels back on, they let me do that, and I was happy. Didn't mind that. I liked that I could move things around. Like you say, for gaming, everything worked. It was a real similar thing to XP. It was like a second version of XP. Everything worked. It was fine. UAC calmed down, and I stayed on 7 until 8.1, and you can probably understand why.
Wow,
But yeah, 7, gorgeous. Yeah, great. They really sorted themselves out, and I think this is where this reputation comes from, right? Of Windows kind of getting it right, then getting it wrong, then getting it right, then getting it wrong, and then we'll skip 9 and we'll get it right again, and that type of stuff. But I am gonna have to shoot off, but this I'm gonna watch this back because I want to hear what you say about 8.
All right, thank you, Ben. So real quick, before just to wrap up the Windows 7 stuff, it was also the first version of Windows to introduce accent colors, so you could change the color of the taskbar and window frames and stuff, which was really nice. And it actually gave you a lot of customization. You could change the hue and saturation, as well as the brightness and the color intensity. There's a lot of customization here, which is great. It was also the first version. What did I want to say? I've lost it. It was in my head, now it's gone. It was the first version of Windows to do what?
I was just going to say, just as long as you give people sliders in life, that's all they want.
Yeah.
I can't remember
sliders
what I was
for
saying.
everything.
But this is it, and this is a very fundamental one.
The snap,
Snap, Windows Snap. That was introduced in Windows 7, and if you ever go back and try and use an older version of Windows without Windows Snap, it's horrible. It's horrendous. You like the simple motion of just dragging your window to the top of the screen to maximize it. You don't realize how much you miss that until you use an operating system that doesn't have Windows Snap. So Windows 7 was the first to introduce this, and I want to say Microsoft even patented a lot of the design when it comes to Windows Snap from Windows 7, which is why so many other operating systems for a long time didn't have this feature. It was a Windows exclusive feature for a really long time. And it was just one of those user experience changes that I don't think people understood as being so innovative at the time, but just makes using Windows so much easier. So that was an issue with Windows 7 as well. And with that, I think it's fair to call Windows 7 an S tier version of Windows. It's hard to argue at anything less, right?
Yeah, easy.
S tier for Windows 7. All right, Ben, are you heading off?
Yes. Thanks, guys. And Mary Jo, lovely to speak to you. I'm sure we'll speak again. I'll have more time next time. But yeah, have fun with 8. See you later.
See you, Ben. Is Mary Jo there? You okay, Mary Jo?
I'm okay.
I think oh, you are. Okay.
I had to feed the cat.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, no worries.
He was running all over hell. I had to get him some food.
No problem.
We're all cat owners here. It's okay. We get it.
All right, up next, we have Windows 8. I feel like Mary Jo, you should start with you because I feel like you have a lot to say about Windows 8.
I know. I have to try to not go too crazy here. Hold on. I'm enabling my camera so I can get back to myself.
No worries.
Okay.
So I'll quickly read off some of the sort of top level facts.
Okay.
Released in 2012, 3 years after Windows 7, it was the follow-up, the mainstream follow-up, and it was a huge departure from what Windows was up until that point. It's introduced the Windows start menu, the start screen, which was a big departure from the start menu and taskbar interface we were very familiar with. It launched a new app model with WinRT, and it was the first version of Windows that really pushed touch as a primary input method for the platform. Mary Jo, please tell us your
thoughts. Take the stage.
Where do you even begin with this? Touch is not the right interface for most Windows users, which Microsoft knew, right? Yeah. And all their testing, they knew that this was going to be a giant flop with business users who are the main constituency of Windows. And I just think it was crazy this ever came to market at all. I feel like they knew it was going to be problematic. One of my favorite anecdotes about Windows 8 is when it launched, I happened to be in a Best Buy, and I was watching the Best Buy employees try to figure out Windows 8. Like, they had it on a big monitor, and somebody came in and said, "Hi, can you guys show me how to use Windows 8?" And they just said, "No, we have no idea how this works. We just don't even know what this is. Like, we can't." And the guy looked at me. I'm like, "No one knows how to use it. It's a terrible operating system. It's an embarrassment. It should never have shipped. And it's appalling that Microsoft shipped it."
Yeah.
I know what they were trying to do, and I know they got excited about, everything was like, they're like, "Hey, let's do a mobile operating system because cloud first, mobile first, was coming up." That was like when Satya Nadella took over. That was the mantra, right? And it wasn't yet his time for Windows 8, but I feel like they just jumped the gun without a lot of evidence that it was the right way to go, and it was disastrous, basically.
Yeah. Would you say this is the first sort of version of Windows where they could have really benefited from splitting Windows between enterprise and commercial and consumer? Or do you think even consumers would have rejected this?
I think even consumers would have rejected this.
Yeah. Is that just because it's such a drastic change? Like, it is just so different from Windows 7 and previous versions before. It is almost like a different operating system entirely. Huge learning curve. And I remember at the time as well, the Windows team were very against tutorials. They had that very brief, like, here's what you do with a cursor as Windows is setting up. You see it one time, and once it's gone, and then that's it. There's no other hints or prompts to how to use the platform. Like, so
they thought people would figure it out by using it, but I'm like, no. I mean, remember the charms bar? I'm like, what the heck is the charms bar? And like, what does it even do, and why is it here?
Yeah. So the thing with Windows 8's desktop is that they made a lot of really nice improvements to the desktop for, using a mouse and keyboard, but it was the interface around the desktop that was the real problem. They got rid of the start button, so now it's just pinned apps on the taskbar. Although the start button still exists, it's now buried in the corner, and Windows doesn't, outside of that very brief introduction video as you're setting up the PC, Windows won't tell you that again. So you have to sort of figure out that you need to mouse into the very corner to open the start screen, which replaces the start menu. And yes, the charms bar, as you mentioned, you go into the other corner, and that brings up the ability to search and connect to and go into settings and stuff. It was a very confusing user experience for
so let's set the stage a little bit here too, what's going on, because there are two things. One, they were coming off of Windows Media Center, which had very kind of similar design and interface, what became Metro, and eventually they tied this in with Windows Phone 7, and its tiles. So there was that. So they had this kind of UI which was well received for those devices, right? Like, people loved their Zunes, and they didn't sell well, but people really enjoyed them. And then you had Windows Media Center, which went on forever. So they were, I think, thinking like, hey, we got a cool UI concept that people are happy with. How can we adapt that? Then the other thing, though, was the elephant in the room, which was Apple. This was the iPad era. This was right when iPad was starting to take off. This was the whole era of post PCs, right? This is we're done with PCs. We don't need it. Tablets are the future. And Microsoft's like looks around like we don't have. They had tablets, right? But they weren't touch optimized. They were just Windows with a touch screen. And so I think they were like, well, let's merge these type 2 things together. And we'll do what Apple did, which is we'll come on the market and be like, ta-da, look at this thing, right?
Right.
But the problem is, and this started back with Windows 98, which is once you get a really established base of users, it becomes very hard to break out of that and do something new because they don't let you,
Right.
And so they wanted to, and they thought, and again, they made mistakes here, but part of me understands them taking the swing and being like, we need to do something. It just didn't work out, right? But I don't know. It's just like it's a shame because I think go ahead.
You're right about the hardware form factor thing. Like this is when they launched Surface, right? In tandem with Windows 8. So they basically built an operating system for a device type that they wanted to throw out there against the iPad. And again, maybe it would have been okay if that was just the OS for those devices, right?
Yeah. Surface OS.
But Surface OS. Yeah, it would have worked for that, I think. If they did like Media Center OS, Surface OS, Zune OS, right? Like things that are customized for the hardware form factor. But like 80-something% of their user base was enterprise users who needed to use a mouse and a keyboard, and they built an operating system that was terrible with a mouse and a keyboard, right?
Yeah.
Yikes.
It was weird using Windows 8 on like a large desktop PC.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just like why is everything so big? And like it's scaled, sure, but they really what they fixed in 8.1, which is making the desktop default, it was the way it should have shipped. Because I can tell you this much: had they shipped desktop first, the blowback wouldn't have been bad. And if they held this just for like what Mary Jo was saying, just for tablet and convertible PCs. But they also allowed desktop users, if they wanted to mess with this, they could. If they allowed, I think people would have been happy. Because I can tell you, people would have not been happy if you were on a desktop and you had no access to this too. They'd been like, I want to try it, But had they done just basically 8.1 out the gate, they could have weathered this a little bit better. But the UWP thing and the style of app also took too long. To catch on. Technically, you'd argue it never did catch on, but people felt that these apps were just like a step back in terms of what you could do with them versus the desktop version. And that was just something they never really were able to fix. They were always, why do I have 2 OneDrive apps or SkyDrive apps?
Right. Right.
It's such a shame as well because Windows 8 was like, it was a great operating system under the hood. It made so many advancements to the platform. It was so fast. It was so light. It made older PCs feel new again. The problem was the UX was just so rejected by the masses that Windows 8 never caught on. But you could also even push that further and say, Windows 8 is the reason why Windows is where it is today, in that it's no longer, it's not a lot of people don't choose Windows because they love Windows. They choose Windows because they have to use Windows. This was the version of Windows that tried to kickstart a new app platform with WinRT. This idea that developers should build entirely new apps based on Windows 8's Windows Store, and you'll go to the Windows Store to download all of your apps. That was that vision eventually sort of morphed into UWP and stuff. But this was Microsoft's bets on the future. Like if they wanted to compete with, mobile and whatnot, they needed a new app platform. And if that wasn't going to work here, then they were never going to be able to break into that market. And so they really needed to try, and it failed. WinRT ended up, becoming UWP and ended up falling apart, and UWP doesn't exist anymore. And so Windows is now stuck with its legacy app platform that it's been dealing with since the 90s. And this is where it went wrong. This was the moment to get that right, and they messed it up. And could they have done things differently? Absolutely. They should have been less heavy-handed on the user interface aspect of things. And they did learn their lessons quite quickly with Windows 8.1, which we'll get to in a minute. But with Windows 8, it's certainly one of the versions of Windows that good intentions underneath, a fantastic operating system, but in regards to actual usability, it was just very poor, and people were not open to learning how to use it or didn't want to use it because it just didn't make sense for the device they were using. And so with that, where do we think it comes on the tier list? I think it's probably...
What's the lowest tier? Can we put it below the lowest tier?
We've got
below
D tier.
You need an F. F.
Surprisingly, there's not an F tier.
I think I can add one. Give me if I can find the tab. Hang on. Oh no, maybe not.
You know what? Again, the reason I'm being really harsh on this is they knew that it's going to fail because they tested. They knew what people thought. Like people were giving them the feedback saying, no, that's not what we need or want, and they ignored it. Right?
Yeah.
Ignore your feedback at your peril, Microsoft.
This is definitely the era where at least the Windows team were trying to be Apple. And they thought they knew better, even though people were pushing back. They were like, no, you guys will like it. We promise. And then it launched and nobody liked it. In fact, I don't think Windows 8 ever surpassed any Windows 7 or even Vista in user base. Right? I think it was one of the least used versions of Windows ever.
Yeah.
But it was followed up with Windows 8.1, so we'll switch to that next. So Windows 8.1 was released only a year later. So this was the first version of Windows to really be released in quick succession in regards to like a mainstream follow-up. And it tried to address Windows 8's biggest problems, that being, the start screen being default, the start button being removed. And they also added some more customization and stuff. And, Major, I'm curious on your thoughts on Windows 8.1. Because I remember there was a lot of... controversy around how it was being developed and how quickly it was coming out and how enterprises were going to handle that. Do you remember anything about that?
I just remember people thinking of it as just a little stepping stone to whatever comes next, right? Like they're like, okay, give me enough fixes for Windows 8 so I can hold on till you give me what I want, which was Windows 10, right? So I kind of lump Windows 8 and 8.1 together, even though 8.1 was the fix for 8. But I think enterprises were like, we're not going anywhere near that. We're going from 7 to whatever is next, and we're skipping that 8 thing. Like, that's not going to be a thing for us, right?
Yeah. You were the first to leak Windows 8.1, right? The codename Blue. I believe that was you.
I believe I was, perhaps.
Yeah. This was back when Windows codenames were exciting. It's like, oh, Windows Blue, what could that be?
I know. Well, I think so many people heard me talking about how much I hated Windows 8. They're like, let's throw her a bone and give her something. So let's just shut her up for a second and like tell her something's coming to fix it and tell her it's called Blue and we're all set.
Yeah. So some of the improvements included, as I mentioned, the start button being restored on the taskbar. Additional snap views for the modern app. So in Windows 8, it was like you could only have it in a sidebar, but with Windows 8.1,
oh my God. Okay. That can I want to rail on that for one more second because I never could get Snap to work ever.
Oh, really?
I like people would see me try to do it. They're like, why can't you do Snap? And they thought Snap was like the coolest thing. And I'm like, this is horrible. Whoever invented this needs to go away because like, this does not work. What is this?
Yeah. Yeah, it was on a mouse. It was ridiculous. You had to go into the corner.
The new thing. What do they call it? Windows with a mouse. You couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
so Windows 8.
But people, what about Snap?
Yeah. So Windows 8.1 tried to address some of those issues with Snap. I don't think they did it entirely right with Windows 8.1 either, but they certainly tried to fix some of its issues. They also added the ability to boot straight to desktop, so you no longer had to deal with the start screen if you didn't want. And then over Windows 8.1 also got its own series of updates over the course of 2014 and into 2015 with 8.1 Update 1, 2, and I think there was a third Windows 8.1 update as well. And those added even more functionality, such as more blending between desktop and modern apps. You could now access the taskbar when in a modern app, and you could minimize modern apps using window controls. That was all added to Windows 8 over its Windows 8.1 over its lifespan. What I do remember is Windows 8.1, the strangest version of Windows in regards to its delivery. They tried to release Windows 8.1 through the Windows Store. Do you remember that? If you wanted to upgrade from Windows 8 to Windows 8.1, you had to update through the Windows Store. And I don't think I ever got it to work. I just had to install it clean with an ISO in the end. It was terrible, really, really bad.
It was odd.
But yeah, that was them really trying to push forward the sort of Microsoft Store, at the time, the Windows Store. Dan, any thoughts on 8.1?
I was definitely a little bit torn at the time with it because this was also the time for Surface, and we're getting like new hardware form factors, right? So this
Pro
was
3
the age.
is out now by this point, or at least about to be out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like now, like it's the convertible PC era, and we're seeing some really. There was the Helix. There was Asus had one. It was basically the one that became sort of like what Surface Laptop Studio was eventually, where the screen pulled forward and they could lay down flat. Like there was just like, so there was real excitement going on with the hardware, and we started seeing more alignment with phone at the time too. So I was definitely more persuaded by that stuff. But yeah, it was hard to. I didn't mind the look of the big start menu for 8 and then 8.1. I think 8.1 though, usability in terms of turning it off was really sort of like, okay. I think for most people that was like, that's all that they wanted, right? But you're right. The rest of the operating system kind of ran fine. Like it was like a smooth operating system. Performance was good on it. Like, I don't know. But it goes to tell you the store, the apps, and that start screen was really divisive. But like what could they really have done here, right? I obviously they could have done a different UX. I'm not saying that part, but I'm saying in terms of with the iPad out there and phones starting to catch on, smartphones, and they're trapped with their desktop legacy operating system and apps. Like I don't know how they get out of that, but they should have probably separated the operating system out, right? They should have had like a Surface OS. And it could have just lived as a niche small thing for a couple of years that they just nurtured and let it grow and mature into something.
So one of the things they added to Windows 8.1 was the ability to turn off the background on the start menu. And I think the thinking behind that was it made it feel more like an overlay on the desktop versus an entirely different
and it did.
interface design. Yeah, I think it worked. I think that really did help people understand that, oh, this isn't a different mode. It's just
it's a giant start menu.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, Windows 8 did not push it as that. Windows 8 treated the desktop as an app, which is definitely the wrong way to go about it. Windows 8.1 fixed that by making it, oh no, this isn't still desktop, but the start screen is an overlay. It now sits above Windows. And that, which was always technically the case, but in regards to how they treated the desktop before, didn't feel that way to users. And I think a lot of people found that just confusing. And so they did fix that with Windows 8.1, which was good to see. Mary Jo, do you remember there was at some point during Windows 8.1's development, and I think it was 2014, they announced that the start menu was coming back. And at the time, I'm pretty sure they wanted to ship that on Windows 8.1, right? Before they changed plan and made that a Windows 10 thing.
I don't remember that, but it sounds plausible.
Yeah, there was definitely builds of Windows internally where they were like, oh, here's a start menu for Windows 8. And then, oh yeah, that has to be true because Windows RT got a start menu. Windows RT had a very special release in the end that added a start menu back, and that obviously never got Windows 10. So there was certainly a Windows 8 start menu, but it never shipped on Windows 8. They left it exclusive to Windows RT, which odd choice, but I'm guessing that's because they just wanted to get everybody, the mainstream user base off Windows 8 and 7 and onto Windows 10, which we can move on to next. But before we quickly do that, where do we think Windows 8.1 comes on the tier list? I think it's better than 8. It's definitely not F.
I thought it was a C.
I think C is fair. Yeah.
It did its job. It gave people a stepping stone to hang on.
Yeah. I mean, it might have been like perceived as a D, but I think that's just because the blowback on 8 was so massive. It just it's like a black hole. It just drags even 8.1 into it. But if we're being honest, I think 8.1 was fine for most people.
And
it was just the recovery. It's sort of like,
And I will say that if you were using Windows 8.1 on a tablet like the Surface Pro at the time, it was great. Like the tablet experience when compared to iPadOS at the time, I thought the fluidity of the start menu and the Metro UI was really good. And like as a touch, if you're using Windows on a touch first device, it was a great experience. It just, when it came to Windows on any other form factor, it did feel like it was lacking a little bit.
Zach, I got scared for a second. I thought you were going to say fast and fluid, and we were going to have to virtually slap you across the face for that.
Fast and fluid, Mary Jo. Right. Let's move on to Windows 10, the version of Windows that I think lots of people have mixed feelings on, because this is one of those versions of Windows, in my opinion, that people love, but I don't know why, because when it launched, people didn't like it, and people were not. Well, I shouldn't say we didn't like it. Its reaction was mixed. I think when it launched, there were a lot of people who had issues with the first version of Windows 10 being quite buggy. I was one of those people. I thought the first version of Windows 10 was really slow, and I had lots of issues with it on my PC. But this was the version of Windows to fix the errors that was Windows 8. So this is the one that brought back the start menu. It added modern app windowing, so no longer apps running full screen. They once again ran on top of the desktop like any other normal Windows app. It added it separated out desktop mode from tablet mode, so that now if you were using Windows on a tablet, you could still have that full screen, but you didn't have to use that. You could obviously pivot back to the start menu if you wanted to. This is where UWP was born, which was an evolution of WinRT, and became a little bit more capable with things like the ability to have also, more desktop-like apps, I guess is probably fair to say. Also, it was introducing things like the notification center, which is something we take advantage of today. The notifications, I want to say, they actually popped up on screen now as well, because I know Windows, the system tray had like the what they called balloons, they were called at the time. But then with Windows 8 and Windows 10, they became actual notifications. But Windows 10 was the first version that actually had a notification center, as long with an action center where you could go and actually like jump into quick settings and things like on mobile. So Dan, we'll start with you. Have you got any thoughts on Windows 10?
Yeah, I really liked Windows 10. And again, I was drinking the Kool-Aid at the time because of Windows Phone. And this seemed like a great middle ground between, there were people who liked 8 and 8.1 and that start menu experience using tablets and stuff, or people using phones. And then, of course, like I said, this like merged kind of both systems. Like I still found the start menu useful in Windows 10. Because you could have those tiles if you wanted to with those apps. And I found the live tile system always great, because it wasn't like I'm just opening up, oh, there's my start menu and a bunch of icons. It was like they were flipping around, showing me real-time information. I could read them without having to open the app. And I thought that was really cool. They looked nice. They added motion to your screen. And so I really liked that you could do that or you could not do that if you didn't want them pinned, right? So I thought it was a really nice hybrid solution that'll, allowed both worlds to sort of live together harmoniously. There was also, you mentioned the Action Center and the Notification Center and stuff like that. Again, this was borrowing from Windows Phone. And so we were starting to see that overlap between UI, and I thought that was kind of cool. This was also the introduction of the Insider program, right? We saw the development of Windows 10 was arguably the most transparent development of an operating system to date. They were giving very early builds of this, and and they're just like, listen, like it was weird for a company back then. It was like, here's a leak of a very early build Microsoft is working on, and you would install it, and now here's Microsoft officially doing it. Be like, listen, this is a really early build. It's gonna be rough, but if you want to try it, knock yourself out, let us know. And that was a really cool thing, because no one had been doing that at that point. So they were bringing the community along with them at the time, and I feel like part of the reason why people have good feelings about Windows 10 is because they felt that they were at least a part of its development. Maybe they didn't get everything they wanted. Maybe not everything got fixed. I know as a Windows 10 mobile user, I was constantly kind of disappointed, right? Windows 10 mobile was like one of those, I see the vision, I see where it's going, but they just never got to where Windows 8 was on the phone, Windows 8.1 really on the phone in terms of performance, styling, and uniqueness. But I saw it was cool to go along with that process, and they were releasing updates every couple of weeks. It was transparency. We knew that the people involved, and so I thought Windows 10 was really great. And like I said, that's the last version where I actually used the start menu, because now, I just pin everything to my taskbar. There's really no use for me for the start menu itself. That's why I don't care when people talk about, oh, it looks like Android. I don't use the start menu ever. Like I use search if I need to find an app, and I use stuff on my taskbar. That's it. So
same. Yep.
You muted, Zach.
Oh, sorry. Mary Jo, any thoughts on Windows 10?
I think when Windows 10 showed up, everyone was just like, hallelujah, it's the Windows I know, right? It was like a relief, right? Everyone immediately was like, I'm going to 10. Like, that's it. Like, I was worried about it. And, when they didn't call it 9, people were like, okay, why? Right? Like, I think it got some people spooked. Like, are they going to do another weird thing like Windows 8, a complete departure? And then when they saw Windows 10, they're like, oh no, it's Windows. I know that this is. I know how this works. It's good. I like it. And I don't really remember having any performance issues or anything with it at the beginning. I just remember a sense of vast relief when it came out. Like, okay, good. We got away from that Windows 8 thing. It's gone. Yay.
Should also mention that this was two things. One was it was a big change for the wallpaper, where they had like a whole post and video about how they used lasers and created that wallpaper, right? Which was like, I liked the wallpaper. It was cool. Like it did have a futuristic like feel to it. I also just liked the thought and consideration that went into it. I'm like, oh, really? You did that much for a wallpaper? Like I just thought it was a wallpaper, right? But just like the Vista one, not the Vista, the XP one, like the Bliss, it was cool to have that sort of transparency and effort that goes into a wallpaper because you see it every day. And I feel like with 11, we didn't quite get that. And I like when companies are really, really thoughtful and explain why they're thoughtful about something. I'll also say this was the first of a big misconception, one I just dispelled again on Twitter, which was this was the last version of Windows. And Microsoft lied, which is not the case. This is a misnomer. So this was, again, Microsoft developer evangelist, I can't pronounce that word. It was Jerry Nixon from Microsoft.
Jeremy Nixon.
In a comment, just kind of off the cuff, talked about this kind of being conceptually the last version in the sense that this was the first introduction of Windows as a service model. The idea that there's going to just be continuous updates, and that it was going to just continue to get better and better. And this played right into the whole Windows Insider program at the time, which was we were actively testing regular builds. And they took that model, basically go, all right, well, we're going to just make that sort of the ongoing model, just in official capacity. And then that got spun by media as like, Windows 10 is the last version of Windows ever. Right. They're never doing another one. And they never put this in writing. They never put it into PR. No one at executive level ever said this. And they certainly never ever said we're not going to do another version of Windows or naming or talk about any of that stuff. But for some reason, to 2026, people are still saying that like they lied. And it's just like, it's not true at all. So it's interesting.
You know what? I think at the time too, like if you think back to when Windows 10 came out in 2015, right? There are a lot of things going on at Microsoft that I think may have led people to think they were going to do something other than Windows, right? Like there were all those secret OS projects like Midori, right? So Midori wasn't even based on Windows at all, right? So people are like, oh, maybe they're just going to not do Windows anymore. And then they were so at that point, like really trying to embrace open source. And there was all these people wondering, are they going to like do something in open source operating system, right? And I mean, I feel like people just were thinking, okay, Windows has played its course and that's it. And the number 10 too played into it, I think, like, okay, 10, that's it, like the end of the chapter and they're done, right?
Right. Yeah.
People read so many things into those kind of clues. Zach and I both know this from covering Codename so much. Like people go nuts, like trying to figure out, like, remember when they were going to not call it Windows 9 and people just were losing their minds about why aren't they calling it Windows 9, right?
Yeah. So Windows 10 is really interesting because, again, it's one of those versions of Windows that introduces a lot of stuff that we take for granted today. Things like task view, as well as the ability to see like app recommendations when you snap an app. That was introduced with Windows 10. It also introduced Windows Hello, support for face and fingerprint readers, which I think a lot of devices use today. And I think a lot of people take for granted as well. Like before Windows 10, if you were logging into Windows with a PIN or a picture password, like that's what Windows 8
Windows
did.
Hello. I hate.
Oh, you don't like
Hello.
Really?
You know why? It doesn't work.
It works. Well, Yeah, it works for me.
Works for me.
Works sometimes, not enough. I don't use Windows Hello. I log in with a password and a PIN.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
Windows
One
10.
day they're gonna block me though, right, from doing that.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Probably.
Yeah, there'll always be PIN, I think, but yeah, because they want to go passwordless, right? They kind of want you to
I
stop
know,
using
I know.
passwords and things, but
Yeah.
I think PIN will always be safe.
Right.
So Windows 10 was also a little bit controversial in regards to its telemetry. Windows 10 was the first version to
Right.
really push forward
Right.
telemetry, data collection, and not really give users much choice in that. It's an issue that that plagues Windows even to this day, but Windows 10 was the first to really sort of hammer on the telemetry aspect of the terms and conditions of Windows. It was overall very popular. It did achieve 1 billion devices, not in the time span that they originally hoped. I believe they wanted to get it done much sooner than they actually did. So they failed in that regard, but it did eventually reach 1 billion users. And it was also a free update for Windows 7 and Windows 8 users, which is, I think, the first and only time they've ever really done that for 2 different versions of Windows. I know Windows 11 was free for Windows 10 users and Windows 8.1 was free for 8, but Windows 10 was the only one to ever be offered to both Windows 7 and Windows 8 users, 2 previous versions. And that was a loophole that was open until 2023, I want to say. They never shut that, even though it was supposed to be a year. You free upgrade for 1 year. That was technically something that remained free up until just a few years ago, which is really quite insane. So yeah, this was also the version of Windows that launched One Core, which is the sort of universal OS platform that shipped on phone, PCs, tablets, Xbox, HoloLens, and Surface Hub. This was
cool.
Yeah, this idea of one operating system that sort of spans everywhere. Vision is dead now. At the time, it was pretty cool, but unfortunately, it never lasted.
I mean, 2015 was a big year. We had Microsoft Band, you had Surface Book, you had the new Surface devices. I think Surface Laptop was the first time too. You had HoloLens announced. You had this Windows 10 thing, One Core. It was just like, whoa, these guys have got this whole futuristic ecosystem. Like, and it all ran pretty well. Like there wasn't like some like bomb in there. Windows Phone, I would say, struggled, but and I was unfortunately at the tail end of the Nokia thing where Microsoft purchased Nokia and brought them in-house, and that didn't work. But like it felt like they just had so much going on. And I remember like, what do you mean Microsoft Band doesn't run One Core? It's like, why not, guys? You know, that should be running full Windows too. But there was this feeling that like, oh man, these guys are really pulled off this vision of this like, and it's just, it all fell apart. And it's like, it's not completely their fault. HoloLens, I don't know, like Zach and I had HoloLens. We both played around with it and it was cool as hell, but it was like, all right, I don't know how to use this, you know, like, and no one wants to strap that to their head to use as a computer. But damn, that thing was awesome. Microsoft Band was great. It just happened to fall apart all the time. So that was 2015 when they did this. It really felt like everything was unified with this like huge push, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, they had a unified vision that just outside of desktop, it sort of just never came to be. And I guess Xbox as well, because Xbox is still around. But yeah. So where do we think it comes on the tier list? I want to give this at very least an A.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to call it S tier. I don't think it's one of the greatest versions of Windows of all time. I don't think so.
It's close. I think it's definitely debatable. I don't know what would be the big drawbacks of Windows 10, or what was the controversy?
I had real issues with the as a service aspect of Windows 10. The fact, to the point, you know, conceptually it makes sense, and it of course it needed to be done that way. But it just left Windows 10 feeling like it was never finished. There were so many work in progress areas of that operating system. They never had a cohesive design. Every context menu was at one point different. You could right click on the desktop and then the taskbar could 2 completely different context menus. It just seemed really messy for a really long time. And they kind of fixed that towards the end of Windows 10 before Windows 11 was announced. But it just took such a long time, and it just never... There was never a cohesive moment where Windows 10 felt done. It was always work in progress.
The way I would phrase this is Windows 10 as an operating system technically worked fine. It fixed a lot of things between 8, the tension between 8 and us wanting to have a regular Windows experience. I think it did that well. It also introduced this bigger vision that they're trying to go for, but it also introduced a lot of the same pain points that we're still talking about in 2026, even on Windows 11.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
You know, telemetry, the not being finished, some unpolished aspects of that, like all that did start with Windows 10 and continues to this day, which I think you're right about that. So
yeah, the ads as well. Windows 10's ad problem was really bad at first. Do you remember you could open the start menu and you'd actually see like third-party games in your apps list? They don't do that on Windows 11 anymore, but that was a thing that started on Windows 10. And to this day, a lot of people say like Windows 11 is worse when it comes to ads. It just isn't. Like people don't remember how bad Windows 10 was at launch. Windows 10 was really, really bad.
Yeah.
So I think I'm happy to keep it at A unless anyone has strong opinions on that.
Nope.
I don't think it's S. Right. So last but not least, Windows 11. This is the current version of Windows, the version of Windows that I think is. Could we say this is the most divisive? Because I know Vista was fairly divisive, but Windows 11 is in a weird spot in the sense that it's the current version of Windows. It's currently the most used version of Windows, but it seems nobody likes it. If you ask anyone on the internet if Windows 11 is a good OS, they will most likely say no. There's more people who dislike it than like it. At least that seems to be the case online. That Windows 11 is the only air quotes bad version of Windows to ever achieve most popular version of Windows. You know, Windows Vista, Windows 8, Windows Me never really surpassed their predecessors in popularity or user base. Windows 11 has. And so, where does Windows 11 sit with you guys in regards to being a good or bad version of Windows? Mary Jo, I'm curious to get your thoughts.
So the thing I like about Windows 11 is it's just an operating system. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't care about the start menu. I don't care about like, can I customize it, this or that. It just works for me. And like, yeah, there are times when there are bugs and updates fail, like a lot lately. But I feel like it's just doing what most people expect out of an operating system, which is just be in the background and don't do anything crazy. Just do your job, operating system. So I think if you're not judging it on looks or like trying to do something innovative, if you're just looking at it as a utility, which is kind of how I look at it, it's good. It's fine.
Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, I think Windows 11 is a really interesting trajectory. It's one of the few operating systems that came out that I think when it was released was mostly positively reviewed and people were okay with it, like the look of it and the changes. It's only in the last 18 months where things have really soured. And I think there's probably two things. One, end of life Windows 10 that really, that's it. And so people had to now switch to Windows 11. I think by nature, since they swelled up to over 1 billion users, you have some of those people who are resentful. They liked Windows 10, didn't want to have to upgrade, all that kind of stuff. And you're just going to have more vocal people who are upset because that's just the way it is, right? Like we talk about Windows 7, but if you have 1 billion users using Windows 7, I'm sure you'd also have 20% being like, it's the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. So I think there's that, but you can't ignore that 18 months AI, right? The elephant in the room. And I am sympathetic here to Microsoft's ambition because, like I said, I feel like this is analogous to Windows 95 and the advent of the internet, except it's moving way faster than that did. And I feel like Microsoft is like, this is our opportunity. We have a partnership with OpenAI, the #1 AI company in the world at the moment. And, we can build this into our new operating system. And so they just started throwing things in there. And listen, it could have worked. Like, it might have been the most genius move ever, and they would have had a Windows 95 moment. But AI didn't work out like that, right? In fact, in 2026, I'd argue there really is still technically for consumers no killer AI thing yet outside of a chat bot, right? We have it, and that's been like that for 3 years now. Besides chatbots, people really haven't, and there is a percentage of people who are maximizing AI. They're creating businesses, they're doing that, like they're doing all this stuff, right? But your average consumer has no real use for AI yet. And I think that, no one anticipated that. I think everybody anticipated at this point, oh, we would be way ahead. There would be these killer apps. And this is where Apple benefits, because Apple screwed up AI themselves. They went all in on Vision Pro, and that tanked. So it's like, oh, they're going to be behind. And so the concern was, oh my God, Apple's going to be way behind now because of this. And they are. But now it doesn't matter, because it's not like Samsung or Microsoft came out with some like killer AI operating system and that's it. How's Apple going to recover? So Apple now has time. So they took a big swing. They missed. And it's a shame. But now we have a different group in charge. They move people around. And so they're undoing a lot of that. And I think they're making the right decisions. I don't think the insider program as is should have kind of gone away. It didn't ever go away. It just became, whatever, it's in the background. We'll just let it simmer kind of thing. And now they're turning that around, making it a focus again. Mary Jo and I were both at the Windows 11 meetup this week. We've talked to the people there, and they're finally allowing their own engineers to do what they did previously, which is talk publicly, go fix bugs that bother them. You have an idea, let's hear it, right? And so the company is finally pivoting again away from that. And they should have never done it, but I also understand we need to get on top of this AI thing and just really, pivot. And for a while there, it worked. Microsoft was like top of the world, most valuable company on the planet kind of thing. But they made a mistake. Yeah. At its core, though, Windows 11, I think, is a solid operating system. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with it. And I don't think this is why in my new article went up, we had, thanks to Zach's question, we asked about why not a Windows 12. And they're like, we don't think that we need to do a Windows 12. We think Windows 11 is solid. We just got to go and tweak and fix the things that people want us to fix, and that will work. And I think they're right, because to do a Windows 12, you really have to be like, all right, here's the new start menu, because it's got to be different. Here's the new taskbar. Here's it. So you have to reinvent all these things. And I'm not sure we need to do that, right? So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree. Yeah, Windows 11 as a core, as a core platform is great. There are just a lot of like smaller issues on the surface that I think people take issue with. Things like, the forced Microsoft accounts. Windows 11 is the first version of Windows to really force them. Like Windows 10 certainly asks you to set one up during, the out-of-box experience, but you could usually just say no. Windows 11 is like, no, you have to have both an internet connection and a Microsoft account, which a lot of people do not like. And I can totally see that being frustrating for a lot of people. There's also obviously the UI changes, the start button's now in the center, that you do have the option to move it back to the left if that's somewhere you prefer having it. They rebuilt the taskbar from scratch, which as a result left a lot of functionality missing when Windows 11 launched. The ability to move the taskbar around was gone, though that is coming back. Microsoft has now confirmed after years of complaints and people wishing it was there, they are finally bringing that back. I will say this was the first version of Windows since Windows 8 Windows Vista, I guess, that had a sort of cohesive vision for design, where they wanted to update every area of the interface as much as they could to something that is the same across the board. They are certainly making progress in that department. They still are not done, but they have done a lot more work with Windows 11 than they ever did with Windows 10 in that regard. So I like Windows 11 for that as well. And yeah, I do. I think it's a nice looking OS. It's fluid. It works well. And there are just some policy issues that Microsoft is addressing, right? With the Windows K2 stuff, they are turning the ship around and they are fixing people's biggest issues with this platform. So even though it is a widely disliked version of Windows currently, I think Microsoft truly believes that it can change that. And it will be the first version of Windows to succeed in that goal, in that effort, if they are able to do that. Because in the part, and I've said this before on WindowsCentral.com, historically, the only way to fix a bad version of Windows is to abandon it. Just move on to the next one. That's what happened with Vista and 7. It's what happened with Windows 8 and 10. It's clear Microsoft doesn't really want to do that with 11. They kind of really want to make 11 work, but will they, is that really up to them? Or will Windows 11 always be known as like a bad version of Windows?
I feel like they could definitely, if they get to a place where they make enough changes, just be like, it's Windows 11.1.
Right.
I don't feel like it needs a 12, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to, we're talking about fixing and polishing, not this isn't Windows 8 where it's like we got to redo the entire UI, right? They just need to tweak things. So yeah, I don't know.
You know, so what they could do, I'm thinking ahead, is if it really doesn't improve, like if people are really dissatisfied by the end of this year with their efforts to try to make it better, they could come out with a Windows 12, right? Like, because already they're doing a bit of a divergence with 26H1 and 26H2, right? If they see like this is not going our way, next year they could just be like, you know what? Here's Windows 12.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
It'd be easy for them to do. And they don't even really need to do that much to do a Windows 12. Because, you know,
they don't.
Look back in the 90s, the 95, 98 looked really much very similar. And they just added lots of quality of life stuff around.
Yeah, but, you know, they do Windows 12. I'm going to have to read this comment 900,000 times for the world's self-proclaimed smartest people on the internet, which is, it's just lipstick on a pig. That's all they're going to say. And I'm going to have to read that comment over and over again. And those people are going to think they're so smart for saying it. And it's like, it's so annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they do have opportunities here.
They do.
I think hopefully this is a corporate lesson for them that you can't ignore your fan base and just let that stuff slide. Like they got to bring people along for this and help them shape stuff.
So where do we think it comes on the tier list? B,
listen, I think
B,
or A. Yeah.
B or A.
Because there is room for improvement. It has made some missteps and it needs to prove itself.
Yeah.
In my heart, I feel like it's an A, but because of the reputation and the culture where it is right now, it's a B, you know?
Right. Yeah. And they did make some pretty big mistakes, especially with the AI stuff, as you pointed out, Dan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think B is a good call for that.
Yeah.
It's so funny, the mandatory Microsoft account thing, I don't
understand why people get so mad about it.
I don't either, because there's not, oh, look, I want to use Netflix. I need a Netflix account. I bought a new wearable. Right? I got a Whoop. I need a Whoop account. I bought a Samsung Galaxy watch. I need a Samsung account. Like everything you buy that has like some kind of service or billing or some sort of something like that, you need an account with. And for some reason, everybody's fine with that. Your phone, your Android phone, needed an account. Like then it's like this one thing is a computer. It's like, no, that's drawing. That's too far. You know, my car has an account. Like, well, really? It's like, it's a weird thing, I think, for people to get mad at, but it's sort of like not being able to move the taskbar. It's just like, okay.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, before we go and we wrap up, I guess we should talk about, speaking of Windows 11, because we were asked this week, what is our number one pet peeves of Windows 11? Mary Jo, we'll go with you first because yours is always pretty funny.
Okay. Well, yeah, they asked me this at our meetup that we went to. They said, okay, if you could change one thing about Windows 11, what would it be? And of course, you know, I went to Notepad immediately as my go-to. And the thing I said that they didn't believe me at first was I'm like, so you can't make tabs optional in Notepad. You can shut off the AI stuff in Notepad already, right? Like you've been able to do that for a while. You can shut off the ability to use Markdown, all those things they added in. And the thing you can't do is make tabs optional, like unless you do it as like every time Notepad starts up, you start up fresh. But then I always forget to do something. And then I'm like, I forgot to do that last thing. I know it does autosave now, which I like. But I think, as I said to them at the meetup, leave Notepad alone. It's supposed to be simple. Just leave it alone. Right. And because I spend a lot of time in Notepad, I really care about that. Right. Like other people spend their time, you know, in the start menu or in apps or somewhere else. I live in Notepad. Like I'm in Notepad probably like 60% of my day. Right. Okay. So fix Notepad, Microsoft, and just leave it alone after that. Fix it and then leave it.
And the reason why they're beefing up Notepad so much is this isn't my main complaint, but it's my small one, which is because they got rid of WordPad.
I know.
WordPad was literally the middle child between Notepad and Word. It's called WordPad, and it had.
Well, they also could just screw around with the OneNote and leave Notepad alone, right?
It's true too. My complaint, which Mary Jo knows and Zach knows, I've talked about on the podcast, I'll just reiterate, but I did tell the team that this week, which was notifications, that they always pop up from the bottom right corner. And I always have dialogue windows open down there, whether it's Slack, whether it's Telegram. So I'll be typing to someone a response, and then the notification is like, hello. And it's a big billboard that comes right in its way. And it's like, now I have to go grab my mouse, dismiss it, and then go back to typing. It's really frustrating. All I want is the ability to, if the very least, instead of give me the option for bottom or top.
Yeah.
Just one or the other. You want to get fancy? Give me a slider. Let me adjust the height. Maybe I want it from, I'm sure there's one or two people out there that want it to come from the left side. That's fine too. I think that'd be kind of cool. But that to me seems pretty simple and basic that they should be able to do. I can't be the only person. So, Zach, what would be your number one fix for Windows 11?
I'm counting this as a Windows 11 issue because it's bundled with the OS, but Outlook needs to not be as terrible as it is. I just cannot stand the current version of Outlook. The web-based Outlook client is...
Outlook.
So what don't you like?
New Outlook.
Yeah. What do you not like? Because I like the app itself. I actually love the functionality. I like the look of it.
I hate how it looks. I hate how it insists upon itself. I hate the icon. I just hate it. I don't like the idea that Microsoft thought it was acceptable. I just don't like anything to do with it. And the only way that I'll be happy with Outlook is if they completely scrap that app and rebuild it from scratch. There's no fixing it. It's not happening, and I'm not ever going to be okay with it unless they. So here's how I look at it: that Windows should have a native email client. It should have a client, an email client it doesn't need to be a complex email client. Office Outlook is there for the most complex stuff. That can always exist as a download that as part of Office, whatever it may be. Windows should just have a lightweight email client that does basic stuff in a lightweight, easy to consume and use form. I don't know why Microsoft thinks Windows needs to have a complex, heavy, slow client for its default email experience. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't want it to be a web app. I want it should be a native Windows UX experience. It doesn't make sense to be a web app to me. Gmail on Android isn't a web app. Apple Mail isn't a web app on iOS or Mac OS. I don't know why Windows thinks that this is acceptable. It just isn't.
Right. But Gmail's not even an app on Windows. So
no, I'm talking about Google makes Android so that their email client is native to their platform.
I think that's kind of like the crazy thing is that Gmail doesn't even have a Windows app, but it's still one of the most popular email things on the planet. So people are just fine going to their browser and using email that way.
Yeah, well, they are silly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I guess we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. By all means.
All right. I guess. Well, like I said, we'll be doing this probably every other week. Next week, Zach and I should be back for our podcast. Mary Jo, where can we find you if we want to listen to more of your insights onto Windows and Microsoft?
So, if you are an enterprise user, you should go to directionsonmicrosoft.com because we have lots of good stuff for you over there. And otherwise, if you're not an enterprise user, I am now doing some freelance work on GeekWire, so you can find my byline there from time to time.
I saw that. Yeah, Todd Bishop, nice guy.
Very
great
nice.
Website. Awesome. Glad to hear. All right, everyone.
Guys.
Yeah, no, thanks for being part of this. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully people get some humor and value out of it. But as always, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.